Good afternoon and welcome to this UniTaster Tuesday. My name is Jon. I'm here from UniTasterDays and I'm going to be hosting this event today where we're exploring competitive courses at university and providing some tips when it comes to personal statements, some tips when it comes to interviews for competitive courses, and also a bit of advice when it comes to work experience as well. These events are all about supporting students to make informed university decisions. So whether you're watching this live or watching back on the recording at unitasterdays.com/Tuesdays, perhaps as part of your school group or maybe directly, a really warm welcome to you, and I hope you find this event really useful. We run these events every single Tuesday at 12 and 2 with different topics and subjects every single week. I'm delighted to be joined today by Amy Dowd. Amy is a Student Recruitment Officer at Keele University, and we're also joined by Lydia Newton. Lydia is a Higher Education Advisor at the University of East Anglia. Amy's going to introduce things first, and then Lydia's going to speak second. Amy's going to cover things like work experience tips, interview tips, an introduction to actually what competitive courses are, and then Lydia's going to talk more about personal statements and a few more examples of what you might expect a competitive course to be. I'm going to introduce first Amy. Amy from Keele University is going to open things up, looking at work experience, interviews, and an introduction to competitive courses. Over to you, Amy.
So, like Jon said, my name's Amy and I'm from Keele University. I'm a Student Recruitment Officer, and today we're going to be talking about applying for competitive courses. So we've got a few hints and tips. I will warn you that there are a lot of GIFs in this presentation. I make no apologies. I would communicate entirely through GIFs if that was possible. What we class as a competitive course. Typically, we're referring to medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine when we talk about competitive courses. So all of those courses that have an October 15th deadline. At Keele, we offer medicine and veterinary medicine. But there are some other courses that we would consider at Keele quite competitive. So you've got things like physiotherapy, children's nursing, and perhaps midwifery as well. But these, so more of your health courses. And the reason these are competitive is purely because they're so popular. So a lot of these courses have placements, so therefore have a cap on the number of places that we can offer, and there are just significantly more applications than there are places, which makes them more competitive. So then how do you stand out from the crowd? Okay, these are some of the things that admissions tutors are going to be looking at. So research, by research we don't mean any medical research that you've perhaps looked into. No, it's more, have you done research into the course? Have you done research into that profession? So they want to see that, and they also want to see evidence of that. When we talk about evidence, we're thinking about your personal statement. Perhaps there might be other ways of showing evidence through a roles and responsibilities form, which is something we have at Keele for things like medicine, which is just an additional layer of finding out what you know and what you've done to prove that you are right for that course. Some of these might have admissions tests. So for example, medicine, again, we have the UCAT admissions test that you have to complete. So your score in those can sort of determine where you get to in the application process. And then we'll have interviews, which we'll come on to shortly. But then they'll also look at your grades, and this might be sort of the first and the last thing that they look at. So your grades, it might be that they look at your GCSE grades first to determine how far you get in the application process, but your A-level grades or whatever it is that you're studying, those won't be looked at until last. So they form a different part of the application process. But what do you need to do before you apply? Well, that's obviously going to be work experience. Obviously, with the 15th of October deadline looming, if you're in year 13 right now, hopefully you've done this work experience. But if not, there are other things you can do as well. So we say necessarily means placement. It's not that you have to do 2 weeks in a specific placement to be relevant for that course. It might be that you do voluntary work, or it might be you have a job and you're paid to do that work. What they're looking for is your knowledge of vocational skills and a knowledge and understanding of the course. So anything that you've done that can feed into that, that's what they're looking for. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the relevant sector. So Veterinary medicine, for example, might be a bit more prescriptive because obviously they want to see that you've worked with animals. So they might say you need 2 weeks in a veterinary practice, or work or so many weeks in a cattery or in stables, something like that. But there is some flexibility around that as well. But generally, it doesn't have to be in a particular sector. If you're looking at medical or health-based roles, then like a caring, supporting, helping role is going to be ideal. So they want to see you interacting with people and patient-facing. Just a little bit of a warning about shadowing. So a lot of places, particularly with work experience placement, might offer you the opportunity to shadow someone. And obviously this can be really useful because you get to see the environments that you might want to work in, but it's important to have other experience too, because I know for Keele, for example, for medicine, shadowing doesn't count towards your application. It's useful, but it doesn't actually count towards the hours they're looking for, because they want to see you demonstrating skills and doing rather than just watching. Now, obviously, a bit of a caveat here with COVID-19, obviously work experience in medical care settings has probably just not been possible for this year, and it might not be for next year either. So you can do other things. There is guidance online about what you can do instead. So really, they just want to see you demonstrating a commitment to helping and supporting others. And this can be done in a variety of ways, especially now. So if you're delivering to vulnerable neighbours or part of a group who go out and deliver, if you're supporting charities or helping to fundraise, these are all things that you can include in an application and can help you to support your reasons for wanting to do that course. So it's just a matter of thinking outside of the box a little bit at this time, and they will take that into account. But where do you write about all this? How do you prove that you've done this, got this experience? So obviously the personal statement is part of the application. I'm not going to talk about this too much because, like I say, there are other ways of evidencing this through perhaps roles and responsibilities forms, etc. But it is still an important part of the application. So what they're really looking for is for you to convince the admissions tutors that you're genuinely excited and curious to study whatever you've applied to. So this could be reading around the subject, etc. But what we would advise is keep it academic as much as possible for the competitive courses. That's not to say you've just got to talk about what you're studying at the moment. Have a think about what experience and academic things you've done that can help with that application, and just make sure it's all relevant to what you want to apply for. But the main thing is be yourself. Don't just say what you think they want to hear, because if it comes to an interview, they'll be able to tell that it wasn't quite genuine. So just consider that. One tip we do have from personal statements is our admissions tutor for medicine actually suggested the STAR method. Now you might be looking at this and thinking, I'm not 10, I don't need to be told how to write a paragraph. However, this is just giving a little hint and making their life easier, hopefully, and making sure that structure is there. So STAR is situation, task, action, and result. So they want to see for each example of your work experience or extracurricular activity, the situation, so where were you? The task, what were you there to do? The action, how did you go about doing it? And then the result is the evaluative part, the important part. So how did somebody benefit from what you did, and what did you learn from the experience? So that's just a little tip for personal statements. Obviously, if you get all that right, the thing that you want to get to is the interview. For competitive courses, you're very likely to have to attend an interview, and obviously there's lots of different types of interviews that you might be asked to take part in, but the main two are a panel interview or a multiple mini interview. MMIs are probably the most common type for competitive courses, and MMIs, if you don't know, are the stations. So you have a number of small stations, probably about 10 or something like that, probably about 5 minutes each, and you go into a certain situation and answer questions just about that situation. Really good format for if you are nervous about a whole panel interview, and plus if you don't do so well on one, you can draw a line under it and move on to the next one without too much detriment, hopefully. So MMI is probably the most common. Obviously, again, with COVID-19, interviews for 2021 entry are likely to be different, so they're probably going to be online, because if you're applying by the October 15th deadline, it could be that interviews start as soon as November, December, and probably not going to be in a position to interview in person. So it's very likely to be an online interview. How that format is going to work, we're not sure yet. You can have a look at online at the guidance. But I think the main hint here and the main tip here is to practice being comfortable speaking on camera, and to check that your software works properly. So it might be that it's a Skype interview, it might be through Teams, it might be through Zoom. So check that you've got what you need to for those online interviews. And then there are 5 main things to do to prep for an interview. All of these things can perhaps apply to any type of interview that you go to, whether it be a job, whether it be work experience placement that you have to interview for. All of these things can apply for interviews that are not just for competitive courses. So the first one, dress appropriately, is what we would always say. Main things are check the instructions in the invitation, because it could be that they've dictated what the dress code is. If it doesn't, so then have a research of the course and the university, have a look at the profession that you're entering into and see what that kind of dress code is expected. Generally, smart dress is going to be expected for your interviews for things such as medicine and any business courses that you might have to interview for. So it's always a safe bet to go smart, but avoid jeans where possible, because there's always one person that turns up in jeans. Keep piercings and jewellery discreet is what we'd advise. So look into the profession, see what the dress code is for that profession, and make sure that you're just adhering to it as much as possible. And obviously be comfortable, because you don't want to be distracted in an interview by uncomfortable clothing. Arriving in good time, this is hopefully obvious. But the first thing to do is, again, check the instructions. And so, you know where you're going. We always have one person who turns up for either a nursing or a medicine interview in the wrong building. So they might assume that the medicine interviews are going to take place at the hospital site, which is not the case with campus. So always check. Know where you're going. Obviously, if it's going to be online because of COVID, then know where you're logging into and make sure you've got the link in time. We say do a trial run if possible. Obviously, if you live miles and miles away and your interview is in person, then it's probably not going to be possible. But if you can, it's always a good option. And just give yourself time, because you don't want to get to your interview and arrive all flustered, as that will affect your performance. So just give yourself plenty of time. Body language, again, important. So sit up straight, eye contact, smile, be positive. Lots of open gestures. I know you're going to be nervous. It's very likely to be nervous. So don't fidget or fold your arms if you can be conscious of that. This one is important for panel interviews, but pay attention to everyone in the room, not just one panel member. So show that you can communicate with a group of people and not just one. But again, if this is going to be online, similar sort of advice, just make sure that you've got that eye contact as much as possible, smile, be positive, and sit up straight. To be expected. There's always going to be some question that might throw you in an interview. So the important thing is don't panic and stay composed. They want to see how you handle in different situations. So thorough research will help with this. Make sure you've done your research ahead of time, and think about what they might ask you. But mostly it's going to be about your communication skills as well as your knowledge. So we always say think about what they're really looking for from the question when they ask. So in medicine, if they ask you to put a sling on someone, they're not necessarily looking at your technique and applying the sling, they're looking at how you interact with the patient and what you say to that patient to reassure them. So just have a think about that. And final tip is asking questions. So make sure the questions are relevant and appropriate. But really, from the question section, they want to see that you've got a genuine interest in that course and in that university, and you're interested in that life, maybe in the profession as well. But just remember, it is a two-way conversation. So you are checking that that place is right for you as well, because 4 to 5 years, really long time. You want to check that that's going to be the right place and the right course for you. So use it to your advantage. Then research. So do research ahead of time. Get the experience while you can. Make sure you can know how you're going to evidence that experience. So keeping track of what you've done. Prepare as much as possible ahead, and then smash that interview. That's what they're looking for. And finally, The best way you can prepare, one of the best ways, is talking to current students. We've got a couple of ways you can do this, but at Keele, the two main ways are we've got UniBuddy, so you can go online and speak to current staff and current students and have an online chat. And then you also, we've got 2 virtual events coming up. You might be sick to death of virtual events, but there are a great opportunity to ask those questions. So we've got one coming up this Saturday and one on the 21st of November. So you can book a place online as well. Okay, and that's pretty much it from me.
Thank you, Amy. Excellent session. Really useful advice, whether it comes to work experience in the current climate and also look at interviews. So taking notes, and my posture, Amy, is good. Smile, eye contact, it's good. I'm fast. Right, so really appreciate that session. Really good. Thank you.
No problem.
Our next speaker today is Lydia Newton. Lydia is a higher education advisor at the University of East Anglia. And Lydia's going to talk more about personal statements. I know Amy touched on personal statements, but Lydia's going to provide more information about them and also give you an overview of some different types of competitive courses over at the University of East Anglia as well. So Lydia, the floor is yours, please.
Yes, so hello everybody, my name is Lydia and I'm a higher education advisor at the University of East Anglia. I'm going to talk to you today about sort of more the personal statement side of things when it comes to applying for competitive courses. Just to introduce UEA, we are a campus-based university in the city of Norwich, so a sort of medium-sized university with lots of different courses. Here's a lovely photo of our campus on a very sunny day. I'm sure it doesn't look like that today as it's raining outside, but yeah, just to introduce the university and where I'm coming from today. So competitive courses, I mean, we've heard a little bit already about what competitive courses are and kind of which of the courses out there are competitive. In a way, any course can be competitive because it really can depend on which university you're kind of studying at, and whether they've got that kind of renowned kind of specialized area for that course. So different universities will be known for being particularly good at different subjects, which can obviously then make nearly every course competitive. I mean, there's some obvious things that will make a course more competitive than others. So obviously the reputation, it might be sort of strong employment prospects that the university's got kind of following that course. It might be they've got a really high percentage of their graduates that go on and get really kind of good graduate roles. It could be a limited place, kind of terms of numbers, so the number of people applying for the number of places. So there's lots of different kind of reasons why a course might be competitive, and obviously a university's reputation as well can make a big difference. These are some sort of, I guess, obvious courses that are known for being competitive. Some of them we've obviously already heard about earlier today. I mean, as an example, at UEA, we're very well known for our physiotherapy course, our environmental science courses. So just picking out a couple of those, they could be very competitive at UEA, but may not be so competitive somewhere else. So it really can depend on lots of different factors as to what makes a competitive course. But I encourage everyone who is applying for university to almost in a way assume that your course is competitive so that you're putting in the best application that you can, and you'll have the best chance of getting those offers. So what sort of students we're looking for really on these courses? I mean, obviously there's lots and lots of different factors that will come into it, but a big one being intellectuals. So we're looking for academics, we're looking for you to be critical thinkers, be reflective, and also be committed to the course. So you're serious about the subject, and as much as you're looking forward to going to university for the experience and the social aspect as well, those academic reasons are the ones that we are interested in from your application. As well as this, obviously we want to know that you're a well-rounded person. So when I talk about personal statement shortly, we always say that the majority of it does need to be an academic focus about why you want to do that course, but we do also want to hear kind of about your other interests and hobbies and sort of what else you're looking forward to doing when you get to university. So what else can you bring? What can you add to the university kind of life at that particular institution? So showing that you're going to kind of thrive in that environment and really kind of contribute to student life as well. So the intellectual, academic, I guess, being the focus, but really kind of bringing in your other interests as well, obviously taking up slightly less room than the academic section. I mean, we'll consider lots and lots of different things, predicted grades being obviously quite a big one. So obviously courses will have entry requirements depending on which university you're looking at, which course you're looking at. So predicted grades are sort of one of the key elements that we will consider. But obviously all students who are applying for that course will probably have very similar predicted grades. So you need your personal statement to make you look different and to hopefully make you stand out and sort of set you apart from your peers and everybody else who is applying. So that's where the rest of your application is really, really crucial in order to make a good competitive application and then hopefully be either invited for an interview or made an offer later on. So in terms of the personal statement, obviously I'm not going to speak in masses of detail, but I'm just going to do a kind of overview of what we're looking for. There's some really kind of key things you want to make sure that you are including and sort of focusing on when you're putting that application in. So obviously your academic interests and why you are interested in that course. What are your motivations? So do you have a kind of career goal in mind? Is it something that you're sort of using as a kind of stepping stone to then go and do an additional qualification? Have you sort of got an end goal? And if you do, it's really great to mention this in your application. If you don't, and actually lots of students don't know exactly what they want to do kind of later on after university, it doesn't matter. You don't need to kind of justify why you don't have that career goal in mind, but what your kind of motivations are for the subject, you really need to make them kind of come through. Wider understanding as well is something that we really like to see. So the knowledge that you've kind of got beyond your A-level curriculum, beyond your BTECs, beyond your IB, whichever qualification you're doing now, if you can show you have a wider understanding for the subject outside of school, this will kind of show us that you are serious about the subject. So whether that is through wider reading, whether you've attended a taster event or through work experience, but that wider understanding will definitely make you stand out. Now, obviously your personal statement is sort of this crucial piece of writing, but you don't actually have very much space to say everything that you want to say. You've only got 47 lines or 4,000 characters, it's sort of whichever one comes first. And it's only really just above an A4 page. So you haven't actually got masses of space to actually pack in everything that you'll want to say. And really, the best way of kind of summing it up is that it's a kind of short piece of positive writing about you and why you want to study a particular course, and basically why a university should give you a place. So it can feel a little bit strange, I think, when you're writing it, because you sort of end up feeling like you're sort of bragging about yourself and being like, oh, look how wonderful I am. But that's sort of what you're trying to do, because you're showing why you are so well suited to that course and why you are so interested in it, in order for the university to think, no, this is definitely someone who we'd love to have at our university, and sort of give you an offer. And obviously to make you stand out from the crowd and look different from everybody else who's going to be applying with very, very similar academic qualifications. Now, I spoke a little bit before about what we're looking for, and this is sort of a rough outline of what we would be looking for in a personal statement. So obviously why you want to do that course is the main kind of focus, and what is it about that subject that really, really interests you. So is there a moment where you watched something on the news, you picked up a magazine, you went to a lecture, you were learning something in school, a conversation you had with a friend? Was there like a sort of a key moment for you where you thought, hang on, that's really interesting, I'm going to go read into that more? I mean, when I say that, try and avoid those sort of cliches of, I've wanted to be a doctor since the day I was born, because nobody's wanted to do anything since the day they were born, because obviously you can't remember that far back. But if you've got sort of a key moment you want to draw on, that's a nice way of doing it. I mean, it doesn't have to be sort of done like that, but what is it really about that subject that interests you? In terms of experience, you may have work experience that's sort of related directly to the course you're interested in. You might have got some extracurricular experience through sort of an internship or volunteering, or you may have done sort of activities within school. Whatever it is, even if you are thinking, oh, it's not quite related to what I want to do, but you want to talk about it in your personal statement, do put it in there and sort of tell us what you learned from that piece of work experience, what you gained, what skills you developed, and then how that's going to sort of help you in your degree and at university. Your interests, obviously, as I said before, do try and get your personality to kind of come through if you can. Obviously, you want to dedicate the majority of your statement to be academic focus. However, if you can weave in your personality, sort of a few hobbies and interests to show sort of what else you're interested in and what else you're looking forward to getting involved in as a university student, this makes you come across as obviously a very well-rounded person, and you might be that kind of keen medical student that loves kayaking, and actually that little thing will stick in the head of the admissions tutor or the academic that's read your personal statement. If you think they sort of read hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications for a course, it is really nice when we can actually hear about you as a person and get a good impression of what you're like yourself, as well as your academic interests as well. If you have a career plan, brilliant, talk about it. If you don't, it really doesn't matter. You don't need to talk about it in there. And gap years. So if you're actually applying for a course with deferred entry, so you're planning to have a year off between sixth form or college and university, it's quite sort of a good idea to mention somewhere in that personal statement how you are planning to spend that gap year. So whether you're planning on working for so many months and then that's going to fund a trip, or you're going away to do some volunteering, or you've got some work experience already lined up, however you're planning on spending that gap year, it's good to mention it somewhere in your statement, because there are a handful of subjects that are occasionally less keen on students having gap years. So sometimes sort of mathematical courses, engineering, I think there's that sort of worry that in that year you might lose some of the knowledge that you will need for your course from your A-levels, especially if you think, well, what you were doing in your GCSEs, those of you that did GCSE maths, and now you're perhaps not doing an A-level in maths, you're probably thinking, I can't actually remember much of my GCSE maths. So actually just having that year of missing out on that subject, you may not want to lose, obviously, the knowledge you've built up. So you might want to think about, how can I spend my gap year productively to do something I kind of want to do, but also how can I do something that's going to help me on my course as well. These are just a couple of little quotes that have been taken from admissions staff at the University of East Anglia. So I think they sort of just highlight really what we sort of talked about before. So obviously the second two really talking about how we want to see a well-rounded individual, not just a good academic. And then the first quote talks about if you're applying for multiple subjects. So if you are applying for a medicine degree, you can obviously put 4 applications in, but your 5th choice will be something sort of similar to medicine, but not medicine itself. So if you're applying for 4 medicine degrees and a pharmacy course, you'll need to address pharmacy somewhere in your application. It might be that you can actually send in a supplementary statement. So you can sort of send your medical ones off to those institutions, and then the pharmacy application, you may be able to contact them and sort of send in an additional statement to cover that course. So do obviously email around your choices and find out what they would prefer, and because that can sort of benefit you if you're able to sort of send them a bit more information. But just make sure you're covering all of the subjects, because it's the same personal statement for every choice, and you need to make sure that it makes sense to each of those options that you put on your UCAS application. Now, this is a method that we sometimes sort of advise when you're writing your personal statement. I know we heard the STAR method earlier from Amy, and I suppose in a way this is a little bit similar. So again, it looks a bit simplistic and childish to having your ABC. However, it's a really, really good way of not only starting your personal statement, but also making sure everything you talk about is in there for a reason and you're being reflective. You really need to show that you've got the skills needed for that course, you understand what's required of that course. So using this method can be really, really beneficial. So as an example, if you were talking about being on a football team, so you've played in a football team or any sports team for the last couple of years, and that's something you want to talk about in your personal statement, that would be your activity. So that's the sort of the A. The B would be, what kind of benefit has this been to you? So what have you learned from this? So you might be saying, oh, I've learned team working skills, or maybe you were the captain of that team, so you'd had to organise the matches, you had to organise the kit, or collecting people's subs to play different games. But it's sort of, how has being on that football team benefited you? But then not just stopping there and saying, oh, well, because I've been on a football team, I'm definitely a good team player. Because for all we know, you could just be the person that never passes the ball. You need to then sort of give an example as to how that's kind of why you are a good team player. So be reflective. So this shows I've got good teamwork because, and give an example, and then how is that going to help you on your course? So always sort of linking it back. Same as if you were talking about a medicine application. I remember speaking to a girl about this a couple of years ago, and she'd waitressed in a restaurant for a while as a part-time job, and she really wanted to talk about it in her personal statement. And she was like, how is this related to medicine though? I can't fit it in. But actually, her sort of waitressing experience and dealing with maybe difficult customers, working in a busy environment, having to act on her feet in difficult situations, could very much be applied to being a doctor, dealing with patients, obviously working in that high-paced environment of perhaps a hospital or in a GP surgery. So just because if you haven't kind of got work experience completely relevant to the subject you want to do, but you've done other things, don't write them off. You can definitely still put them in your statement, but be reflective and give us some good examples as to sort of why that's going to help you and what skills you've developed because of that. These are obviously lots and lots of skills and strengths on the screen, and we're not expecting you to demonstrate every single one of those, but a good way of thinking about what kind of skills you want to show in your personal statement is think about the course you are applying for, and then actually, what would I need to be good at that particular course? So perhaps you're applying for a nursing degree. I'm going to need to be a really good communicator. I'm going to have good sort of time management skills. I'm going to need to be kind of very sort of have a good emotional connection with patients, and think about then those skills. How can I link experience I've got to those to show that I've kind of developed some of these and I've got the right sort of skill set to bring to my course. So think just carefully about the skills and strengths, but don't try and show that you've got absolutely everything. It's always better to show that you've got sort of a few examples in detail, rather than try and tell us absolutely everything you've ever done in your whole entire life in not much detail at all. So depth rather than breadth is definitely something I'd advise. And these are just a few other examples of things you may have done in or outside of school that you might not have even considered including in your personal statement. So it doesn't need to be this great big piece of work experience that you've done that's relevant. If you've done something else where you can show that's really, really helped you and you've gained some good sort of skills and transferable skills from that, then definitely talk about it if it feels that it's right to mention in your application. Some obvious do's and don'ts. I mean, obviously be reflective. That's a really, really key part of your application. Be as clear as you can, because obviously admissions staff and tutors don't necessarily have time to read between the lines. You really want to make it clear right from the beginning, this is what I'm applying for and this is why I'm so interested in it. Do get people to read your personal statement for you. Obviously don't get them to write it for you, because you'll be the one who's got the interview and you're the one putting in the application. And obviously do not mention specific institutions, don't lie, exaggerate, all obvious things that I'm sure you won't do. So I guess there's, lots and lots to take in there in terms of personal statements and different ways of approaching it. But I guess my advice would be don't try and cover too many things, cover a smaller number of things, but in more detail. And it really kind of comes back to you showing that you're a committed learner, you're motivated, you've got good self-motivation as well, and try and show that you've got that wider understanding for the subject outside of your kind of normal curriculum. Obviously, do double check your kind of course entry requirements and chat to admissions teams. So if you're at a virtual open day and you can have a chat with someone from that department, actually ask them what would you look for in an application, and see if you can kind of get some tips from that particular person. Obviously, as Amy said, interview practice is key, especially this year with interviews very likely to be online. It is very different talking to a laptop or a computer or talking to your phone compared to actually sitting in front of someone. So it's definitely worth practicing actually sitting and speaking almost to yourself, and getting that practice in. Think really carefully about what you write, because you haven't got masses of room, and do make sure that your statement is obviously truthful and honest. You're not lying or exaggerating, and just remember that it is a positive piece of writing about yourself and why you want to do that particular course. We also just mentioned have a virtual open day in a couple of weeks' time, and we're running some of our own sort of webinars on subjects such as personal statements. So myself and colleagues will run very similar sessions to this, so feel free to tune in if that's useful. And yeah, thank you very much for tuning in to today's session, and hopefully you found this information useful, and good luck with your UCAS applications. Thank you.